What if I told you an entire town spent more than 100 years trying to erase a single name from history? Every book, every photograph, every record was destroyed. But when a stranger accidentally discovers that forgotten name, strange whispers begin in the darkness, and something that should have stayed buried starts waking up. Welcome to Dark Lantern Stories. Before we begin, tell us where you are watching from, your city, country, and the current time. If you have not already subscribed, please subscribe, like this video, and join our growing community of mystery lovers. It began on a cold evening in the small town of Black Hollow. Most people had never heard of the town, and those who had usually forgot about it soon after. Black Hollow sat between thick forests and silent hills. Travelers passed through without stopping. Maps showed it, yet people somehow overlooked it. There was something strange about the place, something that could not easily be explained. Ethan Cole arrived there during the autumn of 2024. He was a researcher who spent his life studying forgotten history. He loved old records, dusty books, and mysteries buried beneath time. While working in a city archive several months earlier, he had discovered a torn page hidden inside a damaged ledger. Most of the page had faded away. Only a few words remained visible. One line stood out more than all the others. It read, "Never speak the name again." Ethan had searched every record connected to the page, but found nothing. There was no title, no author, and no explanation. Yet on the back of the page, someone had written two words in faint ink: Black Hollow. That clue brought him here. The town looked ordinary when he first arrived. Children rode bicycles along quiet streets. Shop owners swept their doorways. Elderly people sat on porches watching the afternoon fade into evening. But Ethan quickly noticed something unusual. Whenever he asked questions about local history, people became uncomfortable. Some changed the subject. Others simply walked away. At the town library, he met a woman named Clara Reed. She managed the library and knew almost everyone in town. When Ethan asked if she had heard about a forgotten name connected to Black Hollow, she stared at him for several seconds without speaking. Then she forced a smile. "You should not spend your time chasing old rumors," she said. "Most rumors exist for a reason." Ethan smiled politely. "That sounds like a warning." Clara looked away. "Maybe it is." Before Ethan could ask more questions, she returned to her desk and refused to continue the conversation. That night, Ethan checked into the oldest hotel in town. It was called the Lantern House. The building was more than 100 years old. The owner, an elderly man named Walter Finch, welcomed him warmly. During dinner, Ethan mentioned his research. Walter nearly dropped his spoon. "You are studying old names?" he asked quietly. Ethan nodded. Walter lowered his voice. "Then be careful. Some things disappear because they should." Ethan leaned forward. "What does that mean?" Walter shook his head. "Nothing. Forget I said anything." Later that evening, Ethan sat near his window reviewing notes. Rain tapped softly against the glass. The streets outside were empty. As midnight approached, he heard something strange. Someone was whispering. The voice seemed distant yet clear. Ethan opened the window and listened carefully. At first he thought the wind was playing tricks on him. Then he heard it again. A single word repeated over and over. He could not understand the word completely, yet it sounded almost like a name. Suddenly the whisper stopped. Silence filled the night. Ethan looked down at the street. A figure stood beneath a street lamp. The person wore a dark coat and stared directly at his window. Ethan blinked. The figure was gone. The next morning he visited the town archives. The building stood behind the courthouse and contained records dating back nearly 2 centuries. The archivist, a nervous man named Harold Pike, seemed reluctant to help. Still, after several requests, he allowed Ethan access to old documents. Hours passed as Ethan searched through newspapers, census lists, and journals. Everything seemed normal until he found a collection of town council records from 1894. Several pages had been removed. Entire sections were missing. What remained made little sense. One entry caught his attention. It stated that an emergency meeting had been called regarding the matter of the name. No further details appeared. Ethan checked surrounding records. More pages were missing. He found references to disappearances, unusual meetings, and sealed investigations. Again and again the same phrase appeared. The name must remain forgotten. Ethan copied everything into his notebook. As he prepared to leave, he noticed Harold watching him from across the room. Harold looked frightened. "You found it," he whispered. "Found what?" Harold swallowed nervously. "The trail." Ethan stepped closer. "What trail?" Harold glanced toward the door. "Listen carefully. My grandfather worked here many years ago. Before he died, he told me something strange. He said there was once a name that belonged to a person, but also to something else. Nobody knew exactly what it was. People spoke it for years. Then one day they decided it had to be erased. Every record, every photograph, every memory. Ethan felt a chill run through him. "Why?" Harold shook his head. "He never said, but he told me one thing. The more people searched for it, the closer it came back." Ethan stared at him. Came back? What came back? Harold opened his mouth to answer. Suddenly a loud crash echoed from another room. Both men jumped. Several boxes had fallen from a shelf, papers scattered across the floor. Harold hurried away to investigate. Ethan followed. Among the fallen papers lay a small black notebook. Its cover was cracked with age. Harold picked it up and frowned. "I have never seen this before." Ethan looked at the first page. Someone had written a date. 1894. Beneath the date appeared a warning. "If this journal is found, destroy it immediately." Neither man spoke for several moments. Finally, Harold handed the notebook to Ethan. "Take it. I do not want it here." Ethan returned to his hotel and spent the evening reading the journal. The author never revealed his full name. He simply signed each entry with the letter M. The early pages described ordinary town events. Then the tone changed. M began writing about a man known only as the Keeper. According to the journal, the Keeper knew secrets nobody else knew. He possessed records older than the town itself. People visited him seeking answers. Some left satisfied. Others left terrified. One entry described a meeting between town leaders and the Keeper during the summer of 1894. They argued about a certain name. M never wrote the name itself. Instead, he referred to it only as the Forgotten One. As Ethan continued reading, the entries became increasingly disturbing. M claimed people who learned the name began experiencing strange events. They heard whispers at night. They saw figures standing in distant fields. Some reported dreams of endless corridors lined with doors. Behind every door waited the same voice calling their names. Several people vanished completely. No bodies were ever found. Then Ethan reached the final pages. The handwriting grew shaky and uneven. "We failed," one entry read. "We believed destroying the records would end it. We were wrong. The name remembers itself." Ethan read the sentence 3 times. The name remembers itself. What could that possibly mean? The last page contained only a few words. "It is listening now. Do not let anyone speak it." Beneath the warning, someone had drawn a symbol, a circle surrounded by 7 small marks. Ethan stared at the symbol. He had seen it before. It appeared on the torn page that first led him to Black Hollow. Suddenly, a knock sounded at his door. Ethan froze. It was nearly 2 a.m. Another knock followed. Slow, deliberate. Ethan approached cautiously. "Who is it?" No answer. He opened the door. The hallway was empty. Nobody stood outside. Then he looked down. A folded piece of paper rested on the floor. Ethan picked it up and unfolded it. His heart began pounding. The paper contained only one sentence. "Stop searching before the name finds you." Ethan rushed down the hallway. No one was there. The hotel remained silent. He checked the stairs and lobby. Empty. Walter sat asleep behind the front desk. Nobody appeared to have entered or left. Ethan returned to his room and locked the door. Sleep never came. At dawn, he decided to investigate one final clue. The journal mentioned an abandoned church located deep within the forest north of town. According to M, several secret meetings had occurred there before the name was erased. After breakfast, Ethan rented a vehicle and followed an old road leading into the woods. The deeper he traveled, the darker the forest became. Trees crowded both sides of the road. Their branches blocked much of the sunlight. After nearly an hour, he spotted the church. It stood alone among the trees. Weathered stone walls leaned slightly with age. Broken windows stared like empty eyes. Ethan parked and approached carefully. The front door hung partially open. Inside, dust covered everything. Rows of wooden benches sat beneath a collapsing ceiling. Sunlight filtered through cracks above. Ethan explored quietly until he noticed something unusual near the altar. Someone had recently been there. Fresh footprints crossed the dusty floor. They led toward a narrow staircase descending underground. Ethan hesitated. Every instinct told him to leave. Yet curiosity pushed him forward. He switched on a flashlight and descended slowly. The staircase ended in a hidden chamber. Shelves lined the walls. Most were empty, but in the center of the room stood a stone table. Resting upon it was a single book. Ethan approached carefully. The cover contained the same symbol from the journal, the same circle surrounded by 7 marks. With trembling hands, he opened the book. The first page contained hundreds of names written in faded ink. Some were crossed out. Others had been scratched away completely. Then Ethan turned another page and found a name that had not been erased. The moment he saw it, the flashlight flickered. A cold wind swept through the chamber. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the walls, something whispered, and for the first time Ethan realized the forgotten name was not lost at all. It had been waiting. Ethan stared at the open page. The name written there seemed strangely ordinary. There were no symbols around it, no warning, no explanation. Just a name. Yet the instant he looked at it, a powerful sensation rushed through him. It felt familiar, not because he had seen it before in any document, but because some hidden part of his mind seemed to recognize it. The feeling was impossible to explain. It was as if the name had been buried somewhere deep inside his memory for years, waiting for the right moment to surface again. The flashlight in his hand flickered violently. Shadows danced across the stone walls of the underground chamber. Then the whispering began. At first it sounded distant, almost like wind moving through leaves. But there was no wind underground. The whispers grew louder. Hundreds of faint voices speaking at once. Ethan could not understand the words, yet he somehow knew they were all repeating the same thing, the same name. His pulse quickened. Without thinking, he slammed the book shut. Instantly, the whispering stopped. Complete silence filled the chamber. Ethan stood frozen beside the stone table. Every hair on his arm stood upright. He slowly looked around. The room appeared unchanged. Dust covered the floor. Empty shelves lined the walls. Yet, something felt different now. Something invisible seemed to be watching him from the darkness. He carefully placed the book inside his backpack. If this mystery had survived for more than a century, then this book was probably the most important clue he had found. As he prepared to leave, his flashlight beam landed on something beneath the stone table. A corner of metal protruded from under a loose stone. Curious, Ethan knelt down and pulled it free. It was a small metal box covered in rust. The lock had long ago broken apart. He lifted the lid. Inside lay several folded papers and an old photograph. Ethan picked up the photograph first. It showed 8 people standing in front of the church. 7 stood together in a straight line. Behind them stood a tall man dressed entirely in black. The photograph was damaged, but one detail immediately caught Ethan's attention. Someone had deliberately scratched the face of the man in black until it became unrecognizable. Deep cuts covered the image. Whoever damaged the photograph had wanted his identity erased. Ethan turned the photograph over. A message was written in faded ink. The 7 made the choice. The keeper refused. Ethan immediately remembered the journal. The keeper, the mysterious figure who had warned the town leaders, the man who seemed connected to the forgotten name. Could Person in Black be him? Ethan unfolded the papers next. Most were badly damaged by moisture and age. The writing had faded beyond recognition, but one document remained readable. It appeared to be part of an official town record from October of 1894. The document described an emergency meeting attended by 7 council members. Several sentences had been crossed out. Entire sections were missing. Yet, one paragraph survived. Ethan read it carefully. The decision is final. All written references shall be destroyed. All spoken references shall cease. The name must never again be recorded. Future generations must remain unaware. Ethan swallowed hard. Then he read the final line. If the name is discovered again, the cycle will begin again. A chill moved through his body. The cycle. The same phrase appeared in several records, yet nobody explained what it meant. Suddenly, a sharp sound echoed from above. Ethan nearly dropped the document. Footsteps. Someone was walking across the church floor. He immediately switched off the flashlight. Darkness swallowed the chamber. He listened carefully. The footsteps continued. Slow, heavy, deliberate. They crossed from one side of the church to the other, then stopped directly above him. Ethan held his breath. Several seconds passed. Then a voice broke the silence. Leave the book. The voice sounded old and rough. Ethan remained motionless. Leave the book and walk away. The voice came again. Ethan's heart pounded. Whoever was upstairs somehow knew about the book, knew he had found it, yet he had told nobody. The silence stretched. Then the voice spoke once more. You should never have opened it. Ethan slowly backed toward the staircase. Every instinct urged him to run. Step by step, he climbed upward. The wooden stairs creaked beneath his weight. When he finally reached the church floor, he quickly shone his flashlight around the room. Nobody stood there. The church was empty. The old benches remained undisturbed. Dust floated through the air. Broken sunlight filtered through cracked windows. Yet something had definitely been there. Fresh footprints crossed the dusty floor. Ethan followed them toward the entrance. They ended abruptly halfway across the room. Beyond that point there was nothing. No tracks, no signs of departure. It was as if whoever made them had simply vanished. Ethan hurried outside. The forest stood silent around the church. No birds sang. No insects buzzed. Even the wind seemed absent. He quickly returned to his vehicle and drove away. During the entire journey back to Black Hollow, an uneasy feeling stayed with him. Several times he glanced into the rearview mirror. The road remained empty. Yet he could not shake the sense that another vehicle followed just beyond sight. By the time he reached town, the sun was setting behind the hills. Long shadows stretched across the streets. Ethan headed directly for the library. Clara Reed looked up from her desk as he entered. The moment she saw his face, concern appeared in her eyes. "You found something," she said quietly. Ethan nodded. "More than I expected." Clara locked the front door and led him to a small reading room at the back of the building. Once they were alone, Ethan told her everything. He described the hidden chamber beneath the church, the strange book, the photograph, the warning, the voice. Clara listened without interrupting. As the story continued, her expression grew increasingly troubled. When Ethan finished, she remained silent for several moments. Finally, she spoke. "My grandmother used to tell stories about something called the remembering." Ethan frowned. "What is that?" Clara leaned back in her chair. "Nobody knows exactly. Some believed it was a person. Others believed it was something much older. According to the stories, it was connected to a name." Ethan felt a knot form in his stomach. "Go on." Clara nodded slowly. The stories claimed that long before Black Hollow existed, small settlements stood throughout these forests. People lived ordinary lives until one day a certain name began spreading among them. Nobody knew where it came from. Nobody knew who first spoke it. Yet once people learned the name, they became obsessed with it. They spoke it constantly, wrote it in journals, carved it into trees, painted it on walls. Ethan listened carefully. "What happened to them?" Clara looked toward the window. "Most disappeared." Ethan stared at her. "Disappeared." Clara nodded. Entire families vanished. Some walked into the woods and never returned. Others simply ceased to exist. Houses remained. Belongings remained. Yet the people were gone. Ethan remembered the sentence from the journal. "The name remembers itself." Suddenly those words seemed far more disturbing. Clara continued. Eventually community leaders became frightened. They believed the name itself was responsible, so they began destroying every record connected to it. They burned books, removed pages from archives, destroyed photographs. They wanted the name forgotten forever. Ethan slowly reached into his backpack and removed the old photograph. Clara examined it carefully. Her face turned pale. "Where did you find this?" "Under the church." Clara pointed toward the man in black. "That must be him, the keeper." Ethan leaned forward. "You know about him?" "Only from stories. My grandmother spoke of him sometimes. She said he tried to stop the council. He warned them that destroying the name would not solve anything." Ethan felt his pulse quicken. What did he think they should do instead? Clara shook her head. "Nobody knows. That part of the story was lost." A sudden knock echoed through the library. Both of them jumped. The front door rattled again. Ethan checked the clock. It was almost 9 in the evening. The library had been closed for more than an hour. Clara walked cautiously toward the entrance. Ethan followed. Through the glass they saw an elderly man standing outside. Clara immediately relaxed. Harold Pike. The archivist entered looking terrified. He quickly locked the door behind him. "They're asking questions," he whispered. Clara frowned. "Who?" Harold looked over his shoulder before answering. "People I have never seen before. They came to the archives this evening. They wanted to know whether anyone had been researching old records." Ethan exchanged a glance with Clara. What did they look like? Harold swallowed nervously. There were 3 of them, all dressed in dark coats. They never gave their names. Ethan felt a chill. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing." Harold shook his head. "But they knew about you. They knew you had visited the church." Silence filled the room. Ethan's heart began racing. How could strangers know that? Harold looked genuinely frightened. "That's not the worst part." Ethan stared at him. "What is?" Harold slowly reached into his pocket and produced a folded piece of paper. I found this on my desk after they left. Ethan opened it. Written across the paper were 7 words. The name has been found once more. Beneath the sentence appeared a symbol. A circle surrounded by 7 marks. The exact same symbol that appeared in the journal. The exact same symbol that appeared on the mysterious book. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then the lights inside the library suddenly went out. Complete darkness swallowed the room. And somewhere outside, in the silent streets of Black Hollow, something began whispering. Darkness swallowed the library so suddenly that nobody moved for several seconds. Ethan could hear only the sound of his own breathing. Somewhere nearby, Clara gasped softly. Harold muttered something under his breath. Then the whispering returned. It drifted through the walls like a distant wind. Faint at first, barely noticeable. Yet, with every passing second, it grew stronger. Hundreds of voices speaking together. Not shouting, not crying, simply whispering. The sound seemed to come from every direction at once. Ethan pulled out his phone and switched on the flashlight. A narrow beam cut through the darkness. Clara stood beside a bookshelf, her face pale. Harold was staring toward the front windows. "Tell me you hear that too," Harold whispered. "I hear it," Clara replied. The whispering continued. Ethan stepped toward the entrance. Outside, the street lamps remained lit. The rest of the town appeared normal. Yet something felt wrong. The air itself seemed heavier. Then he noticed movement. Across the street stood a man wearing a dark coat. The figure remained perfectly still beneath a street lamp. Ethan's stomach tightened. It was the same thing he had seen outside his hotel window on his first night in Black Hollow. The figure simply stood there watching. Then another appeared farther down the street. Then another. 3 figures. None of them moved. None of them spoke. They simply watched the library. Harold saw them too. "Oh no," he whispered. "What is it?" Ethan asked. Harold stepped backward. "My grandfather described this." Ethan looked at him. "Described what?" Harold swallowed hard. He said that before the disappearances began in 1894, people started seeing watchers. "The people in dark coats?" Harold nodded. "They appeared days before everything happened." The whispering grew louder. Suddenly all 3 figures turned and walked away at exactly the same moment. Not quickly, not slowly, just calmly. Within seconds they disappeared into the darkness. The whispering stopped. Silence returned. Nobody spoke for several moments. Then the library lights flickered back on. The sudden brightness felt almost shocking. Harold looked ready to collapse. Clara sat down heavily. Ethan unfolded the paper again. "The name has been found once more." The sentence seemed even more disturbing now, because somebody clearly knew exactly what was happening, and somebody was watching them. The question was why. Later that night, they gathered in a small room at the back of the library. The old photograph lay on the table. Beside it sat the mysterious note. Harold rubbed his forehead. "I think you should leave town." Ethan looked up. "What?" "You heard me." Harold's voice trembled. "You came here looking for answers. Fine. But now other people know you're searching. That's dangerous." "Dangerous how?" Harold hesitated. "I don't know." The honesty in his voice made the answer even worse. Clara folded her arms. "We need more information before making decisions." Harold shook his head. "No, we need distance." Ethan looked at both of them. "I'm not leaving." Neither seemed surprised. "I've spent months following this trail," Ethan continued. Someone erased an entire piece of history. People disappeared. Records were destroyed. I need to know why. Harold stared at him. Sometimes answers cost too much. Nobody replied. Finally, Clara stood. There might be one place left. Both men looked at her. What place? Ethan asked. Clara hesitated. The Hollow House. The room immediately became quiet. Even Harold looked uncomfortable. Ethan noticed. What is the Hollow House? Neither answered immediately. Finally, Clara spoke. It used to belong to a historian named Samuel Vance. The name meant nothing to Ethan. He spent most of his life collecting local records. Clara continued. Unlike everyone else, he refused to destroy documents connected to the name. Ethan leaned forward. What happened to him? Harold answered. He vanished. The word hung heavily in the room. When? 1896. 2 years after the emergency council meetings. 2 years after the name had supposedly been erased. Clara nodded. People searched for months. They never found him. And the house? Abandoned ever since. Ethan felt curiosity building. If he collected records, there might still be something there. Harold immediately shook his head. No. Ethan frowned. No. Nobody goes there. Why? Harold looked away. Because strange things happen there. Ethan almost laughed. After everything he had already seen, strange things hardly seemed important anymore. But Harold was serious. My father entered the house when he was young. The room grew silent. What happened? Ethan asked. Harold swallowed. He spent one night there. And when he came home, he couldn't remember 3 days. Ethan stared at him. What do you mean? He remembered entering the house. Harold's voice had become quieter. He remembered leaving the house. Everything between those moments was gone. Clara nodded slowly. I've heard similar stories. Ethan looked from one to the other. You believe them? Neither answered. That silence told him everything. The next morning, Ethan stood outside his hotel room preparing to leave. Despite everyone's warnings, he had already made up his mind. He was going to the Hollow House. The old book remained inside his backpack. He had spent most of the night studying it. The strange thing was that every time he opened it, he noticed new details, names, dates, symbols, information he was certain had not been there before. At first he assumed exhaustion was affecting his memory, but eventually another possibility occurred to him. What if the book itself was changing? The thought disturbed him deeply. Before leaving town, he stopped by a small diner for breakfast. The restaurant was nearly empty. Only 3 customers occupied the booths. An elderly woman sat alone near the window. As Ethan passed, she suddenly spoke. You found it. Ethan stopped. The woman continued staring at her coffee. Found what? The book. A chill moved through him. He had never seen her before, yet she sounded completely certain. Slowly, he sat across from her. Who are you? The woman smiled faintly. Someone who remembers. Ethan's pulse quickened. What does that mean? The woman looked up. Her eyes seemed unusually sharp. The town forgot many things. She paused. But not everyone forgot. Ethan leaned forward. You know about the name? The woman's smile disappeared. For several moments she said nothing. Then she nodded. I knew people who spoke it. Ethan felt his heart racing. What happened to them? The woman looked toward the window. They were taken. The answer came so quickly that Ethan almost missed it. Taken by who? Her gaze shifted back to him. That is the wrong question. Ethan frowned. Then what's the right question? The woman's expression became serious. The right question is what? Before Ethan could respond, she stood up. He quickly rose after her. Wait. The woman reached into her coat pocket. She placed something on the table. A key. Old. Heavy. Made of iron. Then she walked away. Ethan hurried outside. The street was empty. The woman had vanished. There was no sign of her anywhere. For several moments he stood frozen. Then he looked down at the key in his hand. Attached to it was a small metal tag. One word had been engraved into the surface. Vance, Samuel Vance, the owner of the hollow house. An hour later, Ethan followed a narrow road leading away from town. Dark forests surrounded him on both sides. The deeper he traveled, the quieter everything became. Eventually, he spotted the house. It stood atop a low hill overlooking the woods. The building looked ancient. Weathered wood covered the exterior. Several windows were broken. Vines climbed the walls. Despite years of neglect, the structure remained standing. As Ethan approached, another strange feeling settled over him. The house seemed familiar, not because he had seen it before, but because he had dreamed about it. A memory suddenly surfaced, one of the strange dreams he had experienced since arriving in Black Hollow. Long corridors, closed doors, whispering voices, and at the end of the corridor, a house. This house. Ethan stared at it. The realization sent a chill through his body. How could he have dreamed about a place he had never seen? The front door was locked. He removed the iron key. It fit perfectly. The lock clicked. Slowly, the door swung inward. Dust filled the air. The smell of age and decay drifted outward. Sunlight filtered through broken windows. Everything inside appeared untouched. Furniture remained where it had been left. Books lined shelves. Papers covered desks. It looked less like an abandoned house and more like a place frozen in time. Ethan entered cautiously. The floor creaked beneath his feet. Every room contained books. Hundreds of them, perhaps thousands. Samuel Vance had clearly spent his life collecting information. Ethan moved from room to room examining titles, history, genealogy, maps, town records, personal journals. The collection was enormous. Then he found something unusual. A locked door. Unlike the others, this door appeared newer. Someone had reinforced it with metal brackets. A symbol had been carved into the wood. A circle surrounded by 7 marks. The same symbol. Again. Ethan felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Every clue led back to it. Every mystery connected to it. He tried the handle. Locked. After several attempts, he inserted the iron key. To his surprise, it turned. The door slowly opened. Beyond it lay a narrow staircase descending underground. Cold air drifted upward, much colder than the rest of the house. Ethan switched on his flashlight. The beam illuminated stone steps, disappearing into darkness. He hesitated. Every major discovery had led underground. The church, the hidden chamber. Now this. Taking a deep breath, he began descending. The staircase seemed endless. Step after step, the air grew colder. Finally, he reached the bottom. His flashlight revealed a vast underground room. Shelves stretched across the walls. Thousands of documents filled them. Records, journals, photographs, entire histories. Everything the town had tried to erase. Samuel Vance had preserved it all. Ethan stared in amazement. This was the missing archive, the lost history of Black Hollow. Then his light landed on something at the center of the chamber, a chair, and someone was sitting in it. Ethan froze. The figure remained motionless. Dust covered the clothing. The skin appeared gray with age. A skeleton, seated upright. waiting. Around its neck hung a wooden sign. Words had been carved into the surface. Ethan slowly approached. His flashlight trembled in his hand. Then he read the message. I remembered too much. And beneath those words, written in faded ink, was a second sentence that made his blood run cold. The name is not buried. The name is waking up. Ethan stared at the wooden sign hanging from the skeleton's neck. The word seemed impossible to ignore. I remembered too much. The name is not buried. The name is waking up. The underground chamber suddenly felt much colder. He slowly swept his flashlight across the room again. Thousands of documents filled the shelves. Decades of hidden history surrounded him. Every missing record, every erased report, every secret that Black Hollow had tried to bury. Samuel Vance had collected them all before his disappearance, or perhaps before his death. Ethan looked back at the skeleton. Dust covered every bone. The body had clearly been sitting there for many years, yet something about the scene felt deliberate, almost staged. It was as if Samuel Vance had wanted someone to find him exactly like this. Gathering his courage, Ethan stepped closer. The skeleton wore old clothing that had nearly fallen apart with age. A leather satchel rested on its lap. Ethan carefully lifted it. The leather cracked beneath his fingers. Inside he found several notebooks and a sealed envelope. The envelope immediately caught his attention. Across the front someone had written a message, "For whoever finds this place." Ethan sat down at a nearby table and carefully opened it. Inside was a folded letter. The handwriting was neat and surprisingly clear. My name is Samuel Vance. If you are reading this, then I have failed. Ethan felt a chill. He continued reading. For many years, I searched for the truth behind the forgotten name. I believed knowledge would protect me. I believed understanding would keep me safe. I was wrong. The letter continued. The name is older than this town, older than the settlements that came before it, older than the records hidden in these chambers. People think it belongs to a person. It does not. People think speaking it gives it power. That is not true either. Ethan leaned closer. Then what was the truth? His eyes moved to the next paragraph. The name is a door. Ethan frowned. A door? The words made little sense. He continued reading. Most people spend their lives unaware of it, but once discovered, the door begins to open. Every thought about it opens it further. Every search, every question, every memory. Ethan suddenly remembered the strange sentence from the journal. The name remembers itself. Perhaps it had never been a metaphor. Perhaps something truly was happening. The letter continued. I have spent 20 years studying the phenomenon. The town leaders believed destroying records would stop it. They were wrong. Knowledge can be hidden, but curiosity cannot. Sooner or later, someone always begins searching again. Ethan slowly lowered the paper. That someone was him. He had reopened the trail. He had found the records. He had found the book. And now strange things were happening throughout Black Hollow. A terrible possibility entered his mind. What if the events were not a consequence of discovering the mystery? What if they were the purpose? What if the mystery wanted to be discovered? The thought sent a cold shiver through him. He forced himself to continue reading. If you have reached this chamber, then you have already attracted its attention. It knows you now. Ethan stopped breathing for a moment. Knows you. The exact phrase echoed inside his mind. Suddenly the underground room felt far less empty. His flashlight moved across the darkness beyond the shelves. Nothing appeared there. Yet he could not shake the feeling that unseen eyes watched from every direction. He continued reading. There is one place where answers remain. The oldest location connected to the name. The place where everything began. Beneath the sentence was a map. A crude drawing of the forest north of Black Hollow. Several landmarks had been marked. One location was circled repeatedly. Beside it appeared two words, Ashwood Clearing. Ethan folded the letter carefully. At last, a location, a lead, a possible answer. But before he could examine the map further, something happened. A sound. Soft. Barely audible. A footstep. Ethan froze. The noise came from somewhere beyond the shelves. He listened carefully. Silence. Perhaps it was the house settling. Perhaps his imagination. Then another footstep echoed through the chamber. Closer this time. His pulse quickened. Slowly he stood. Who's there? No answer. Only silence. Then another step. Then another. Something was moving among the shelves. Ethan grabbed his flashlight tightly and moved toward the sound. The beam cut through the darkness. Rows of documents stretched endlessly before him. Dust floated through the air. Nothing moved, yet the footsteps continued, one shelf away. Then another, always nearby, always hidden. Ethan rounded a corner. The sound stopped. Complete silence. His breathing echoed loudly. Then he noticed something strange. A document lay on the floor, fresh, not covered in dust, as though someone had dropped it moments ago. Ethan picked it up. His heart nearly stopped. The paper contained a photograph. A modern photograph, not old, not historical, recent, very recent. The image showed Ethan standing outside the library. The picture could not have been more than 2 days old. His hands began shaking. Someone had been watching him, closely. The realization was terrifying. Then he noticed writing on the back, "You're closer than the others." Ethan immediately spun around. The chamber remained empty, yet the message felt personal, intentional. Not a threat, not exactly, more like an observation. Suddenly another sound echoed from somewhere above, a loud crash. The house. Something had happened upstairs. Ethan quickly gathered the map, notebooks, and letter before rushing toward the staircase. He climbed as fast as possible. The old wooden steps groaned beneath his weight. When he reached the main floor, he stopped abruptly. The front door stood wide open. He was certain he had closed it. A cold wind moved through the rooms. Papers fluttered across desks. Books had fallen from shelves. Several chairs lay overturned. Someone had entered the house. Someone had searched it. Ethan moved cautiously through the rooms. Every instinct screamed at him to leave, yet curiosity kept pushing him forward. Then he heard voices. Outside, near the front porch. He immediately extinguished his flashlight and moved toward a window. 3 figures stood outside. Dark coats, the same watchers from town. They spoke quietly among themselves. Ethan could not hear every word. Only fragments. Too late. Already knows. Must reach the clearing. The clearing. Ashwood Clearing. His pulse quickened. They knew about it. Whatever mystery surrounded the name, Ashwood Clearing was important. Perhaps more important than he realized. One of the figures suddenly turned toward the window. Ethan ducked instantly. His heart pounded. Several seconds passed. Silence. Then footsteps moved away. After waiting nearly 5 minutes, he cautiously looked outside again. The figures were gone. The forest stood empty. Night had fallen completely. Darkness stretched across the trees. Ethan decided not to remain in the house. He gathered everything and hurried back to town. The drive felt longer than before. Every shadow seemed threatening. Every bend in the road felt dangerous. By the time he reached Black Hollow, rain had begun falling. Heavy drops struck the windshield. The streets were nearly empty. He drove directly to the library. Clara opened the door before he even knocked. The moment she saw his face, she knew something had happened. "What did you find?" Ethan entered quickly. "A lot." Harold was already there. The archivist looked exhausted. Dark circles surrounded his eyes. Ethan spread the map and documents across a table. For the next hour he explained everything. The skeleton, the letter, the underground archive, the photograph, the watchers. Neither Clara nor Harold interrupted. When he finally finished, silence filled the room. Harold looked terrified. Clara looked thoughtful. Finally, she pointed at the map. "Ashwood Clearing." Ethan nodded. "You know it?" Clara hesitated. "Only from stories." "What kind of stories?" Her expression darkened. "The oldest stories in Black Hollow." Ethan leaned forward. "Tell me." Clara took a deep breath. "My grandmother spoke about it once." The room became silent. She said there was a clearing hidden deep within the forest. Clara continued. Long before settlers arrived, people avoided it. Why? Because strange things happened there. Harold sighed. Everything strange happened somewhere around here. But Clara shook her head. No, this was different. She pointed at the map. The story said people sometimes entered the clearing and came back changed. Ethan frowned. Changed how? Clara looked directly at him. They remembered things that never happened. The answer unsettled him immediately. What does that mean? No one knew. She folded her arms. People returned with memories that didn't belong to them. The room fell silent again. Rain hammered against the windows. Thunder rolled somewhere beyond town. Then Harold suddenly stood. "I know where I've heard that before." Ethan looked at him. Heard what? The remembering. Harold's face had turned pale. My grandfather's journals. He rushed toward a cabinet and pulled out an old notebook. His hand shook as he flipped through pages. Finally, he stopped. There. He pointed at a paragraph. Ethan read it. "The clearing does not create memories. It shares them." A chill passed through the room. Harold continued reading. "Those who enter begin remembering lives they never lived, faces they never met, events that never happened to them." Clara stared at the page. "What does that mean?" Harold swallowed. "I don't know." Then he turned another page. His eyes widened. For several moments he simply stared. "What is it?" Ethan asked. Harold looked up slowly. Fear filled his face, because written across the next page were words that changed everything. The name does not belong to one person. The name belongs to all who have ever known it. And beneath that sentence, written in darker ink than everything else, appeared a final warning. When the door opens completely, every forgotten memory returns. The words on the page seemed to drain the warmth from the room. When the door opens completely, every forgotten memory returns. For several moments, nobody spoke. Rain continued striking the library windows. Thunder rolled across the hills surrounding Black Hollow. Outside, the town seemed trapped beneath a blanket of darkness. Ethan looked down at the map of Ashwood Clearing. Everything pointed there. The hidden church, the underground archive, Samuel Vance's letter, the watchers. Every clue led to the same place. Finally, he stood. "We're going." Harold immediately shook his head. "No." Ethan looked at him. "We don't have a choice." Clara nodded slowly. "He is right." Harold stared at both of them. "You don't understand. Every story ends there. Every disappearance. every warning. Exactly, Ethan replied, which means that's where the answers are. An hour later, they left Black Hollow. The storm had grown worse. Rain poured from the sky as they followed an old forest trail northward. The deeper they traveled, the stranger the woods became. The trees appeared older, larger, twisted into unusual shapes. The air felt unnaturally cold. Eventually, the trail ended. They continued on foot. Lightning flashed overhead. For brief moments, the forest became bright as daylight. Then darkness returned. After nearly 40 minutes of walking, Clara suddenly stopped. "We're here." Ethan looked ahead. The trees ended abruptly. Beyond them lay a large clearing. Ashwood Clearing. The place felt wrong immediately. Not dangerous, not evil, simply wrong. The silence was absolute. No insects, no birds, no movement. Even the storm seemed quieter within the clearing. At its center stood a circle of ancient stones. Each stone was covered in faded symbols, and on the largest stone appeared the symbol Ethan had seen everywhere. The circle surrounded by 7 marks. As they approached, a strange sensation washed over him. Images flashed through his mind. Faces, voices, places, memories. Thousands of memories. None of them belonged to him. Ethan stumbled. Clara grabbed his arm. "You see them too?" He nodded. Harold looked terrified. "I know these people, but I've never met them." The memories continued. Entire lives passed through Ethan's mind like brief flashes of light. A farmer working a field, a woman writing in a journal, a child running through the forest, an old man standing beside the church, hundreds, thousands, generations. Then suddenly Ethan understood. The clearing was not creating memories. It was preserving them. Every person who had ever learned the forgotten name had left something behind. A memory, a fragment, an imprint. The name was not a person. It was not a monster. It was not even an object. It was a connection, a bridge between minds across generations. The realization hit him like lightning. The town leaders had misunderstood everything. They had become frightened and tried to erase the name. But the name was never the threat. Fear was. The more people tried to destroy it, the more mysterious it became. The more mysterious it became, the more people searched for it. The cycle continued endlessly. Suddenly, a familiar voice spoke behind them. "You finally understand." The 3 turned instantly. A man stood near the edge of the clearing, tall, dressed in black. Ethan recognized him immediately. The keeper, or at least the man from the old photograph. He looked older than any normal person should, yet somehow he was still alive. Harold stepped backward. "Who are you?" The man smiled faintly. "Only a guardian." Ethan stared at him. "You knew all of this?" The man nodded. "For a very long time." "The name isn't dangerous." Again the man nodded. "No." "Then why erase it?" The keeper looked toward the ancient stones. "Because people fear what they do not understand." Lightning flashed overhead. For a brief moment the clearing glowed white. The keeper continued. "The name was once used to preserve knowledge." His voice remained calm. "Memories of those who died were carried forward so future generations could learn from them." Ethan listened carefully. The name connected minds. The keeper nodded. But eventually people stopped understanding its purpose. He sighed. They became afraid. The old man looked around the clearing. So they buried the truth. Another memory suddenly flashed through Ethan's mind, this one stronger than the others. He saw the council meeting in 1894. He saw frightened leaders, burning records, destroying books, erasing history. The memory felt completely real. Then another realization struck him. The door Samuel Vance described was not opening into some terrible place. The door opened into memory itself, into history, into everything humanity had tried to forget. The keeper looked directly at Ethan. "You came searching for a name." Ethan nodded. "Yes." The old man smiled. But the name was never the mystery. Ethan understood now. The mystery was why people feared it, why they buried it, why they allowed generations to forget. The storm began fading. The rain slowed. A strange peace settled over the clearing. The countless memories surrounding them no longer felt overwhelming. Instead, they felt comforting, like voices from the past finally being heard. The keeper stepped toward the ancient stones. Every generation has a choice. Ethan listened. They can fear knowledge. The old man's gaze moved across the clearing, or they can learn from it. Then something extraordinary happened. The symbols carved into the stones began glowing softly. A warm, golden light spread across the clearing. The memories became brighter, clearer. For one brief moment, Ethan felt connected to every person who had ever stood there, every life, every struggle, every lesson, every dream. Then the light slowly faded. The visions disappeared. The silence returned. When Ethan looked around, the keeper was gone, completely gone. No footprints, no sound, nothing. Only the ancient stones remained. Weeks later, life in Black Hollow slowly returned to normal. The Watchers were never seen again. The whispering stopped. The fear that had haunted the town for generations gradually faded. Using the records hidden by Samuel Vance, Ethan helped restore much of the town's forgotten history. Not every mystery was solved. Some secrets remained buried. Some questions remained unanswered. Perhaps they always would. But one thing became clear. History is not something to fear. Memory is not something to erase. And the truth has a strange way of surviving, no matter how deeply it is buried. As for the forgotten name, Ethan chose never to reveal it publicly. Not because it was dangerous, but because the name itself no longer mattered. What mattered was the lesson hidden behind it. That knowledge can be lost. History can be erased, but curiosity will always lead someone back to the truth. And somewhere beyond the forests surrounding Black Hollow, beneath the silent stars, the memories of the past continued waiting for those willing to listen. If you enjoyed this mysterious journey, let us know where you watched from, your city and country. Share your thoughts about the forgotten name and what you think you would have done if you discovered the book. Do not forget to like this story, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another mystery from Dark Lantern Stories. Until the next story, keep your lantern lit and stay curious.